In 1971, Dr. Edgar Mitchell made a successful journey to the moon and back. As dramatic as this achievement was, something even more incredible happened to him on his way home to Earth.
Something that would change him forever. The courageous explorer of outer space became the pioneering explorer of inner space. Let's find out what changed Dr. Mitchell so profoundly.
I'm Michael Mannion.
I'm Trish Corbett. Welcome to Mindshift.
Our guest today is Apollo 14 astronaut Dr. Edgar Mitchell. Dr. Mitchell received his doctorate in astronautics and aeronautics from MIT. He's the author of Psychic Exploration and also The Way of the Explorer. In 1973, Dr. Mitchell founded the Institute for Noetic Sciences, and Dr. Mitchell, we're so happy to have you as our guest today.
Yes, and Dr. Mitchell, we understand that you have been nominated for the Nobel Prize.
Well, thank you. Yes, I was nominated, and
Yes.
it's very nice.
Yes, I should say.
And especially it was for your work in noetic sciences. And I think that shows that progress has been made.
Yes, we were pretty much alone 35 years ago when we started all of this.
Edgar, I know that your moon trip was an astounding event, and we could easily spend a lot of time talking about that, but I would like to focus to begin with on what happened to you on that trip that was so startling. But I know that you might need to let us know what led up to it and so on. But could you tell us about that?
Yes, we'd left the moon. We're on the way home. And my job primarily was with lunar surface activities and the lunar spacecraft to go down to the surface and come back. So when we were on the way home, largely my primary job had been completed. And we were coming home on a well-functioning spacecraft. We still had experiments to do, etc., but it was much more relaxed. And in addition to that, we were rotating every 2 minutes to keep a thermal balance on the spacecraft. It's called the barbecue mode, for example.
So it was like a barbecue
Garbage
pit.
pit,
Okay.
right. But what that caused to happen was that the Earth, the moon, the sun, and the 360-degree panorama of the stars and the galaxies and the galactic clusters were there, visible. In space, the stars and everything are 10 times brighter. There's an order of magnitude more visibility due to the lack of intervening atmosphere. Mm-hmm. So that sight is utterly overwhelming. And what happened was I was looking at that, and I realized from my science training that I was thinking about the molecules of my body and the molecules of my spacecraft and my partners were manufactured in some ancient generation of stars.
Oh, think of that.
And wow, but wait a minute, that's what I learned in college doing my doctoral work, but those were my molecules, and suddenly it became not intellectual but personal. Mm-hmm. It became a visceral experience, and accompanied by an ecstasy, a wow. It was a personal connection. And I didn't know what that meant. I had no understanding of that whatsoever. But to jump ahead, it took me several months of research before I discovered in the ancient Sanskrit that experience was called samadhi. It was the situation where you see things in their separateness, but you experience them viscerally with bliss in their unity and their connection.
That's beautiful.
And so it was a pretty wild experience.
Yeah.
So it's so interesting that your science led you to the moon, and your science led you to a subjective experience that the ancients would describe maybe more in a mystical tradition.
Yes. As I continued my research, I got all excited by that after I got back. It was so profound that I couldn't let go of it. I had to go find out, what does this mean? What's going on up here? And that's when I started doing my research, and finally, I found nothing in the science literature.
Nothing?
Well, nothing about consciousness, because consciousness wasn't a subject appropriate for science, certainly not in those days. So I started digging into the mystical literature, not the religious literature, the mystical literature, pre-religious literature. And that's where I found it. Then that really aroused my curiosity, so I started looking in other traditions, other cultures too, other than the Hindu culture. And I eventually began to realize that every culture among their ancient people, the aboriginal people of whatever, their shamans, their medicine men, their mystics, or by whatever name, were reporting these similar types of connectedness with everything. In other words, the mystics of all traditions forever have been saying we're all interconnected in some mysterious way. Well, all of a sudden that was what we were experiencing.
They would have a similar experience, but would they describe it in a similar or different way?
Well, I think that is precisely one of the problems. If we want to call this experience an esoteric, transcendent experience, and we find that it's in all the literature or in the folklore of all traditions in their ancient literature, and largely handed down in oral traditions, that if we want to call that the esoteric, but let's call the explanation of it the exoteric, the external communication of the internal experience.
Internal experience.
And we find that those differ, not from the mystics themselves, but from the followers who haven't had the experience.
In terms of their understanding,
in
through
terms
the
of
words.
their understanding and interpretation. So we say that I say that the esoteric is the foundation of religion, but it's the exoteric that becomes religion. And of course, they're all different, but they're based upon the same experience, same types of inner experiences.
I understand.
So just to jump back a minute to you're in the spacecraft and you've been taught the universe is a certain way. You're looking out and you perceive it in a new way. In the Newtonian universe, the mechanical universe, they use the analogy of a clock that works like a machine. When you saw that it was different and you felt this connectedness of you with the universe, the Newtonian universe is kind of a dead universe, dead matter, dead energy. Was your samadhi experience, did you see it in a...
I realized the conundrum here. That our science, based upon a Newtonian materialist deterministic concept, would say that consciousness, or how we perceive things, is an epiphenomenon, a byproduct of matter, of the accidental organization of matter. But in the ancient traditions, the oral traditions, they perceive that consciousness is the fundamental stuff, and matter descends from consciousness.
So it's just
so here we have two different concepts from the mystical and religious and the scientific. And in our modern time, it goes back to Descartes, where Descartes made the conclusion that body, mind, physicality, spirituality belong to two independent realms of reality. In terms of philosophy, it is that the primal cause is matter, but in terms of traditional religious, mystical experience, the primal cause is consciousness.
So it's a real dichotomy.
A real dichotomy. And so it occurred to me, even on the flight coming home, that humans forever have asked the questions, who are we? How do we get here? What's this all about? What's our relationship? That now that we were a spacefaring civilization, having been off our planet for the first time, that maybe we needed to re-ask that question in terms of more modern knowledge and launch a new investigation, more detailed, into how do you solve this problem of consciousness using the tools of science, but approaching the concepts of mysticism.